Thank you for joining us tonight. It is November 4th. This is the Research Triangle PowerShell Users Group. My name is Mike Kanakos. Myself and Jeremy Brown are going to be presenting tonight on getting started with the Azure Arc console, the Azure Portal. Tonight, super basic. The reason I say it is we got no slides. We have not a lot planned. We're just going to basically kick around in the console a little bit here and take a look at what we got. So first of all, let me give you guys a lay of the land so you can see what we're talking about here. I'm assuming that everybody here has some experience with the Azure Portal in some way, shape, or form. Just give me, let's use the hand raise feature or someone pop it in the chat. If you're not familiar with the Azure Portal at all, maybe just give me a little pop up there so I can give people a lay of the land. All right. So a couple of people here and there. All right. So this is the Azure Portal. It's at portal.azure.com. You can also download a Microsoft app, which I unfortunately don't have on this machine. I can show it to you real quick. This is my work account here, and this is the Azure Portal app. So you see it's a Windows modern app, and it looks almost exactly the same as the Portal website itself. So what's the difference? There really is no difference. For home, I use the website. When I'm at work, believe it or not, I rock most of the times in the application because the application will maintain your identity. So I can just launch the app and I'm pretty much logged in and it's ready to go. So that makes it more convenient. I don't need to do that as much for my home account and my lab. So I just work within the Azure Portal website, but you can use either one that you like. If you've never been here before, you have a left-hand bar that shows you most of the resources, but not all. This is customizable. And one of the things that's very much the thing to remember with Azure is you just search for whatever you need. So if you need to get to Azure Active Directory, you can just search. And then these services up here will start to populate with things that you've used. So what you're looking at here is my home lab account. And I have been using these options, and that's why they're here. This menu item here, you can move these around and customize this. But some of these things don't show up by default. You have to add them. Like, for example, Azure Arc was not in the list. So I actually went to the top here, Azure Arc. And then you can pop open like that. You can then, once it shows up in the list here, you can fly over and you can star it, and then it will be like a permanent add. This is your favorites list. I'm sorry, you go to all services, and then you can find it from the list that way, like this, Azure Arc, and you find what you want, and then you mouse over and you can get a star, and then it'll pop into that favorites list. So this is customizable. They throw in some of the basics, but if you don't use load balances, for example, you can take that out of your view. So what we're going to be fooling around with tonight is Azure Arc. And Azure Arc, if you're not familiar with it, I did have one thing I wanted to show, is the slide here. So let me do this, Control-J, zoom in a little bit. So some people may have heard about Azure Arc from some of the Ignite announcements over the past year. And most people think of Azure Arc as a way to do multi-cloud from the Azure console. And that's 100% true. But what a lot of people don't understand is that it's also a way for you to be able to manage your on-prem equipment. The idea here is that you bring all your resources to Azure, not actually like migrate resources to Azure. So in other words, I'm not moving my on-prem servers into Azure. I'm just representing them in the Azure console. I'm pulling in resources from many different areas, and I'm using the Azure console to manage all that. And I will tell you that I did not know that myself until a few weeks ago, because this is a service that we're exploring at my current employer to use. We are migrating some of the on-prem services that we have to Azure versions like monitoring. We want to get rid of our on-prem monitoring, and we want to use Azure monitoring. So Azure Arc is one of the ways to do that. So when I saw that, I thought this might be useful to share with people, because I think the whole idea of representing your on-premises assets inside Azure Arc is sort of an unknown to people. So this is it for the demos. There's no slides. We're going to jump in. The rest is going to be here. So I am in Azure Arc here, and on the left-hand side here, that's all you get. And everything that I'm working with here is represented in this server resources. And I probably should stop here and say hello to Jeremy Brown. I didn't introduce you in the beginning, Jeremy. I'm sorry. Why don't you say hello to people? And
Hey, what's happening, everybody?
yeah, so Jeremy's going to jump in here and explain a little bit of what we've been doing. Jeremy and I have been playing together in this console here. So the premise is that you install agents on your machines, and those machines phone home to Azure Arc, and then you can use Azure Arc to manage your resources. That's the big reveal here. So when I go to servers, you can see here that I have two servers that are in the console here, and these servers, just so you're aware, relate. This is my Hyper-V that's running on the home computer that I'm presenting from right now, and I have this server here represented in the console. So connect. I already have it connected. So that's this VM that I have here. But this VM has an agent on it, and this VM phones home to the Azure Arc console. This web server is a Linux box. And if you take a quick look here, you will see that I'm a Windows guy. I have no Linux boxes. So this is a VM for my son. This is just a throwaway machine, 2 Windows 10 clients, 2 Server 2019 servers. So where is that Linux VM? And that's a good segue into Jeremy Brown. This web server is running on Jeremy's laptop at his house, and we've pulled it into my portal. And that's the idea here. The idea is that you can pull in resources from many different areas and represent them in one place. So Azure Arc is going to roll up a view of all your assets, and then you use the tools in Arc to organize those assets into views that make sense for you. But we have 2 here, and I'm on a pay-as-you-go subscription. This is not a whole lot to organize. But so Jeremy, how did you make out with that web server? That you're all set, right? This is something we added in yesterday, and this is running on a local laptop at your house, right?
Yeah, so that's just a CentOS OS and server install that I use at my own house. And so we did an on-demand install. So like if you hit add, sorry,
No, it's okay. Just going to pull that over. So if you go add, this is how
you interactively will add something. Do you want to go ahead and go through this?
Sure. I was going to basically go through the same thing. So you could walk this through if you want. So you have a way here to do like a one-on-one, a one-by-one, or you can do at scale. So obviously with 2 machines, we've done the interactive version here, and this is pretty intuitive. So let me just give you guys a little primer. So I'm not an Azure Pro yet. I wouldn't call myself. I'm an Active Directory admin. I've done 15 plus years of AD on-prem stuff, and I'm learning the Azure cloud. I am responsible for Azure AD at work. Jeremy is the same with Azure AD. We do a lot of services in the Azure cloud, not together. We work for different companies, but we help each other out, learning some stuff, mostly him helping me, but do a lot of enterprise applications, SSO. But I have never worked with Azure Arc. And the cool thing about this is that this is pretty well documented. If you don't know what you're doing, you'll find out here through these learn more buttons. You can really learn how to use this tool in I think I put in about 3 hours before I felt like I kind of knew my way around. And 3 hours, when I mean 3 hours, it's a light 3 hours. So the way this works here, what Jeremy was just talking about is you can import servers by simply running a script, and you walk through a wizard here, right? So if we walk through this wizard, what this is asking me here is for some resources that we're going to populate into a script. So I have one subscription pay as you go. I created a couple of resource groups. This one's called Arc Demo. And then if you want, I mean, you have to pick a region where that's going to live. I'm in East US, and you have to pick an operating system so it knows how to customize the commands for the machine that you can install us on. If you have a proxy server, you can enter it there. And then it starts to get a little bit more interesting. So Jeremy and I both ran through this wizard. When Jeremy did this, Jeremy, you could take over here if you want. You could describe it, and I'll just drive.
So, everything in Azure is run by tags. So that's kind of the idea here. So as you bring in your devices, tag them appropriately so that you can search on those tags later. You'll even be able to deploy policy and things like that against different tag data. So in mine, you can see like these are kind of the values that I was just putting in so you would see what the tags look like on the devices when they come in. And then beyond that, you can add all your own custom tags. And it's, for those that aren't familiar with Azure, all of the tags are just simple key value pairs. So think of any way that you need to namespace your resources inside Azure, and then you use your tags essentially to establish that. And you can stick as many tags as you want for the most part on any of the resources in Azure.
And these tags, multiple purposes, but they're all going to help you to find things later on. So you can use them as an organization resource. You can call tags from certain scripts and tools and stuff like that. And just like Jeremy said, these are sort of the defaults that we hear. But then down here, I mean, you literally could put whatever you want and populate any values you want. So after you fill out some tags, which by the way, you don't have to fill out any tags, it'll take you to a script page here. And I have this represented over here. This is that script. So this is a Windows version of the script. So it's just doing a simple MSI. And what the script will do, I don't know why this isn't going over, is you're going to run the script. You can copy the script and you're going to run it, and it will go out and it will download the agent, and then it will call the agent and run it. And because you populated some information, resource group, some tags, it's already plugged that stuff into the script so that when the thing phones home, it should show up automatically in your Azure Arc resource. So it's basically a download and run, and there you go. And we can attempt this. I took out my key here because I didn't really want to have that. That's public knowledge here, but let's slide this over here. So all I'm going to do is copy that script. And then, so I have 2 VMs running here. The GUI one is the one that's already in there, and then I have a core version. So let's see if we can get the core version in there. And as I said when we started this is going to be a hot mess. It may work, it may not. We're just going to go with it. So I'm just going to pop this in there. I just did a paste. When I did this the other night, I had to modify the command a little bit for it to work, but I think this is running in the background already. I mean, there's not a whole lot to see here, right? This is not the most exciting part. But the point is that it's that easy to, oh, you know what? Hang with me, folks. I just need to do a little housekeeping here. Okay. I'm sorry, guys. So not recognizing the command. All right, we'll take a look at that in a second. So I'm just looking at here. Don Hunt is asking, is Arc available on the Azure Stack Hub of Azure? That's a good question. I don't know. You're talking about the standalone version that they shipped to you. I I don't see why it isn't, but I will show you in a second that this is very much a tool that is being developed right now. You're going to see when we get into the console and we go through a little bit, there's a lot of features that are coming that you can't actually use. We'll come back to this in 1 second. What's the maximum amount of data and tags you can use for an object? Thomas Nielsen hitting me with the hard ones. No idea. What's the cost of Arc? Arc is based on the data that you pump into it. So there is no real cost because you're not doing anything. Arc is really about logs more than anything. So you're going to pump data up there, which I'm going to show you in a sec, and then you have to store that data somewhere. So it depends on the cost to store your logs and how much volume is going into your storage. But I can tell you that I'm running it right now and I have some logs go up there and I think I'm at like 3 cents for the week. I'm sorry, Jeremy, I kind of took over there. You were talking a little bit. I'll give you a chance if you had something you wanted to talk about while I'm taking a look at this error here.
So I was going to say you can run this anywhere because it's not about the platform that it's running on. Everything for Arc is enrolled by an agent on the device. So think of it more like an SECM client or something like that. So any platform is essentially supported. It's really a question of whether the local device is supported or not.
Well said. Oh, that's not going to help me. All right, let me try pasting this back. So what did it complain about here? So it didn't find the agent. This is the same problem I had. It downloaded the agent somewhere, and if I bet you, if I did it here, it's probably in here. Yep, it's in here. So we have to change the path. Of course, I'm doing this in a core machine. It's a pain in the ass. All right, you know what, guys? I'm going to come back to this. I'll come back to this, I promise. But this runs, and then what ends up happening is you end up with, where is my portal here? Sorry, guys, I got multiple windows open.
I would add that the Linux script just worked.
The Windows script did not work. I had the same problem on my other machine. It's just that the script they give you doesn't recognize where it downloaded the file to, and I can show you that because on my GUI machine here, you could see when I ran the update, I didn't know what I was doing at first. It just pulled down script and the client here, and then if you open up the script, it's looking for a different directory than the MSI. So I had to just point to the new MSI, to the location of the MSI, and then it worked. That was the only thing I did. So that script that I ran, if the tags are the same and the client is the same, like Windows or like Jeremy said, Linux, you can just reuse the same script over and over again. And the script is pretty intuitive. You can edit the tags yourself once you learn the syntax. It's not a challenge. You see here, here's my tenant ID. Right, but over here, here's the resource group. Did the tags go in here? I guess the tags are in the MSI. But my point is, once you fix that pathing problem, you can just do that over and over again. So what you end up with here is you'll end up with an asset in the dashboard that's just like this. And once it gets into the dashboard, you can then dive into the asset. And here's where the magic happens. And the reason that I wanted to show this is because me as an on-prem guy that's managed servers for 20 years on-prem, the cloud is a little bit like, at the same time, awesome because you can get rid of your Exchange environment, and scary because you can run virtual apps in the cloud and do all this single sign-on and stuff like that. And if you've never been exposed to that world, it's a huge change. But when you get to Azure Arc and you see this stuff right here, well, this feels like server management to me. And this is like right in my wheelhouse. Makes a lot of sense. This is what I deal with every day. So update management, that's patching. Logs, that's logging. Monitoring insights is about up, down, alerting, stuff like that. Sorry, let me go back here.
So Mike, Diego had a question about connectivity. The agent is just 443 traffic outbound to Azure. So whatever you put it on, if you're putting on a server in your data center or whatever, you'll need to be able to reach over the public internet the Azure endpoint. So when you go through to add it, there was an option for a proxy server that you can put in, and then it'll load that in on the agent. So the agent knows to route through a proxy server. If you don't have a proxy server, then you leave it blank, and the agent will just make it's all polls, no push. So the agent will just continually poll REST endpoint in Azure and pull down whatever policies have been applied to it.
And here's where that proxy server would go in. I don't have a proxy server, so we just skipped past this. So I was starting to walk through these things here. So policies, you can configure policies against your machine. And the interesting thing about this is you have a list of servers that come in here. And if you're a cloud admin and you're managing resources, this is where that whole idea of treating your servers like cattle and not as individual pets. You apply a policy. I don't give a crap about these machines. It's just, do they meet my policies or not? And then there's also in here compliance settings, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. So you can apply things like a framework for security to a system, and you can immediately tell whether that system meets the compliance of a framework or not. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Change tracking, inventory, all that good stuff, and security. So the good and the bad, right? Super simple console, easy to use. The bad is many of this stuff here, if you take a look at this right here, is not ready for prime time, the preview features. So not everything that you see here tonight is ready to rock and roll. So what is available?
Hey, Mike, are you supposed to be sharing your screen? I'm not seeing it.
I am sharing my screen. Is anybody seeing my screen?
No,
I
it
think
just
someone
dropped
put you on
off.
spotlight
Yeah,
mode.
you were
Okay.
sharing your screen, and now
There
we're
you
looking
go.
at you.
All right. Thanks for the heads up, guys. If someone can just, how's that, better?
Yeah.
All right. So I apologize for that. If someone could just give me an idea when the last time my screen dropped off so I can make sure that I didn't miss something.
It was literally a couple of seconds before someone asked.
Okay. So I was just going through this feature set here, and I was just starting to say that this is sort of the main pieces here of Azure Arc. But they relate to other pieces of Azure, like Azure Monitoring is a separate piece to Azure that integrates with Arc. So you can get to the same resources from monitoring that you can get to by driving into a server and going to the monitoring on that server. I'll show you that in a second. But what works today and what doesn't? So logs works today, monitoring insights works today, policies works today, security works today, and there's a catch there. Security works when you're using Defender ATP and you're signed up for that. And extensions work today, which I did not mention. What doesn't work right now is update management, as far as I can tell, and change tracking. Yeah, now, also remember that I'm on a pay-as-you-go plan, which is basically the bottom of the barrel, right? So for someone who has a corporate account, and maybe for someone who has a very well-established corporate account that's using a lot of services, those services may be available for you in preview. But for me right now, I can't play with update management and I can't play with change tracking as much as I'd like to. They're just not available for me. So we talked about getting machines in, but you're not done there when you get things in. And I say that because there's two pieces to this puzzle. The first is getting an agent on the box to get it to phone home. But when it comes to logs and monitoring and policies, you need a second agent. And that's really, I think it's basically the modern version of Microsoft Operations Manager. And I could show you that because I have it installed on this box. I think that's this one, MMA setup. So after you get the machine installed in your console, if you want to push logs up, you need to pull down this second agent. You configure it And when you have this connect here, then what happens is it will start funneling up logs up to your up to Azure. You don't have to do this. You can just pull the asset into Arc and do other things with it. But if you want to track things like logs, performance stats, up, down, all that kind of stuff, you need to pump some data up there. And then along with this piece here, there is a selection to say, what kind of things do I want to send up there? So it's a two-piece there. So the first piece is I'm running a script that will download a connect agent. This is the Azure connection agent here. And that will run, and that will then phone home and get my console to display the machine. After the machine is displayed, I'm going to come back around and I'm going to deploy this is called a log analytics agent. And the log analytics agent, when you install it, runs on the machine and then sucks data and sends it up to Azure into the log analytics service storage account. Depending on the amount of data that you send up there is what determines the cost. And then automation comes into that as well on the cost as well. How many jobs you run, how often you run, how long they run. But I'm not there yet, so I can't answer too many questions on that one. So I'm sure this is all pretty new to everybody. So maybe we should just stop here and see if there's questions, or maybe I didn't explain something right. Any questions about what you guys have seen so far?
Just that last part, you call those both different agents. So are those still, after you're done with them, both continually running on every server?
As far as I can tell, yes. So,
Right.
and I'll explain that a little bit more. So when you go into logs here,
Yeah.
okay, when you configure logs, and Jeremy, if you have any experience with this that I'm misrepresenting, you let me know here. How did I do this?
Oh, you're doing fine.
I don't think I did it this way.
It's usually easy to get approval. I say easy, but get approval, to put agents on domain controller. But when you say, all right, now I got 2 more agents I need to add to every domain controller, it's like, geez, how much stuff do you want to? How much stuff are you going to pack on these things?
Well, so I hear you on that, but you got to think of this in a different way. So the reason that I wanted to present this tonight is because what I feel like we're looking at right now as a group is how Microsoft envisions us managing stuff in the future.
Right.
And what I have noticed over the last, let's say, 5 years since Azure has sort of become prominent is that Microsoft has gotten way better at offering services that you would normally go to a third party for. And I'm not saying that third party services don't matter anymore, but the old days where you would pull down Windows Server OS and you'd get it on, and then you'd bolt on 52 things to do all the things that the OS didn't do great, I think those days are going away. As you see here, they're starting to offer services that hopefully are as good as the third-party services that are out there. Now, there is a way to add plugins. So third-party, what will happen is third-party services will be in the cloud as well, and they will just offer a plugin that you can connect to, let's say, like Splunk, right? So you're just funneling data into the cloud, and then the cloud is routing that data to the service or something like that. So going back to the point that you mentioned, I don't think of this as like layering on another 2 more agents. I feel like I'm putting on 2 agents, and I'm going to start pulling off others.
And
Right.
if you're thinking about it that way, that's good.
Yeah. So, and I see your point, because I understand, I remember the days of having like, well, the box has 4 gig of RAM in there, but it also has 7 agents, and those 7 agents are
Right.
consuming 2.5 of the 4 gig of RAM, right?
Great.
When it's just sitting there doing nothing. And then I need to configure my workload to actually work as well. So I hear you on that one. But I think the idea here is that you get those agents on. Maybe you're done, or maybe I shouldn't say that, because everybody's going to have on security agents and stuff like that. But
I would also add that they're not they're independent services. You can have one without the other. Azure Arc is there for compliance and remediation, right? So Azure Arc is there to tell me I am currently out of whatever my intended desire is, right? And in doing that, I can also say I want it to deliver my log analytics client, which is a separate service where I get more feature-rich data to support other things as well. because you might have multiple workspaces that are sending different data sets into them. And then you're going to generate reports off of those different data sets in those different workspaces, right? So I only need one log analytics agent to be able to ship data into Azure for any log analytics workspace that I need to capture that data set from on those servers. But I can do that without Arc. Just like in Arc, I can figure out whether or not I am currently configured as my servers are configured as I intend them to be without using log analytics. So those are two separate agents that are doing two different services. It's just Arc makes it really easy for me to get the agent on the box and for me to state an intent for what data I want more feature-rich information from.
Yeah, that's cool stuff. Yeah, I'm usually fighting to get agents on domain controllers, so I hear you.
So one of the interesting things is that when Jeremy and I were looking at this together, I kind of jumped to the operational roles and Jeremy jumped to the compliance roles just as a natural kind of thing. I think he probably is dealing with more of the compliance aspects with security for the role that he serves in his job. And I'm dealing with the day-to-day maintenance of servers and reporting. So we saw the same tool and had two different uses for it, right? So, and that makes a good point because Jeremy is going to take over and talk about the compliance stuff in a little bit. I just wanted to show the basic interface here, and then we can jump into questions. I didn't show like here's our tags, right? So you could see, why doesn't it show the tags for the server? And what if I go back out? Is there tags on the thing there? Yeah. So guys, I apologize. I was in here before, and I know that I saw the.
Go to your web server, Mike, and check the tags, because that's the one that would have been set up by his script.
But I set up tags on mine yesterday, so I don't know. I put the same tag. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I didn't apply it, but because I'm in a different city than he is, we're next to each other, but different towns. So I had a different data center in a different city. Let's see if I could do that. But here's those tags that he applied to his server, right? Now if I go back to DC1, I go to tags. So city, yeah, it didn't take my tags yesterday for some reason. I must not have. Data center.
I do it pretty regularly where I'll add stuff in and then forget to hit the apply button at the bottom.
Yeah. No. States. Yeah, apply. Jeremy, I also made a new log analytics account thing yesterday, so I can't believe this actually works today. But so you can see with tags here, right? So he's got his own set of tags, and then you can use those tags later on to view, and you can start to see the use cases for that there, right? So then we have a whole list of things that you can do here on the right panel for each server, and we're going to jump into that a little bit here. Let me just take a quick look at my notes of what I wanted to cover, make sure I didn't miss anything. So intro, tour the console, what's available, what's coming soon. How did we add assets? How did we do it? Okay, show off logs. So Jeremy, you want to talk about compliance stuff or you want to talk about logs? You have a preference?
Yeah, well, we've already kind of started down the log route, so I say let's knock that one out first.
All right, so I don't know if you turned on anything with pumping logs up to this on the web server, so I'm going to stay in my box here.
I did not, so yeah, just stick on yours.
Okay, so in logs here, let's see if I get this right. All right, so what I want to show you guys here is this works off the Custo query languages that I will tell you I do not know. But there are a bunch of built-in searches that you can do here. Okay, I'm going to go back into this for a sec because I should have left that window up. So here's a whole bunch of built-in queries that you can run. Now, most of these don't work because I'm not pumping up the right kind of data. Obviously, if you're not sending up information about APIs, you're not going to see stuff there. But there's a whole host of things. I do want to show you real quick. There's lots of categories and lots of pre-built queries. If you pick a query, right, if you pick this, it will pump it in here. And I've looked at this. This is not the hardest language to understand. I actually have to learn it for work. I haven't gotten there yet. The one command I do know how to do is to pull up your performance data. And if I run that, damn it, I do this every time. It throws a second line on. And you'll see here, so these are the logs coming up from my machine. So, I mean, this is what I was prepared to show you guys tonight, which was basically, I am ingesting logs. Now I have to be very candid with you. I have to learn the language to figure out how to query these logs and do something with it. And I notice this is just the performance data because that's what I asked for. I did send up system data as well. I'm drawing a blank right now on how the hell I did that, so I got to remember that one.
It looks like a SQL. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks very close to that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, there's supposed to be an advanced button here. Where the hell did that go?
I think I saw select top 100, just at a glance, and I was like, oh yeah, it's
SQL-like.
Yeah.
SQL-like, so that shouldn't be too bad.
And the interface logs, so you got this thing here, right? And if you pull something into the editor is like, if I do this, and I mean, it's,
That's all.
you can point and click and get through it, right? So I don't imagine myself struggling too hard to figure this out. But it is its own language, and you do have to, and then there is a whole piece here. So let me jump out of here for a sec, because I know it's on this panel. So now what I did here is I left Azure Arc and I went to monitor, right? So now from here, I can look at things like alerts, metrics, and logs. So this is where there's like a cross-pollination. So in here, I can go to logs and I can pull from my log data, and it knows the only log data I have in here is from that server. But now when I was looking at the logs before, I was looking at a per server view. This is a log view of whatever log data I have, and I can select the scope here. And I can pull in different options here when this loads, right? So I can pull out where I am here. This is my log analytics account. This is an account I just made. My point is that you can get to different areas now from a logs standpoint rather than from a per machine standpoint. And that's one of the cool things about this is once you get the data up there, you're now just in the Azure ecosystem, and the things, once they're set up, so tools sort of cross-pollinate, like we have here, monitor. There's Arc, obviously. I think there's a logs function over here. But the point is, you can look at it from a per machine basis, or you can look at it from a service basis. I want to look at logging, I want to look at monitoring, and you can do them from either way, right? I can't really show you guys too much with the logging because I just got this working yesterday and I haven't figured out the language yet. I haven't pumped up information to it yet to figure out what's going on there that well. Before I move off of this, here's an activity log that shows me all the work that was going on here that I've done. This is like an activity log of the Azure console if you want to come in and see what work has been being done here. If I had alerts set up, I could set up alerting here. This is what we're working on in my current position. We're working on basic alerting, up, down, CPU, memory alerts. You can generate out metrics. I don't think this is going to show anything. I couldn't get this to work earlier today. Yeah, I just don't know this that well. And I didn't really want to get into the details of trying to show you guys a bunch of stuff. I really wanted to show you the console, show you what was available, right? All right, so one thing I can show you that is a little interesting is, so we talked about logging, right? And obviously logging can be a big deal and you can do a lot with that. One of the other things that's cool about this that I think, what happened to my Arc service? Arc servers, DC01, is this policy section. And this is what you're going to see here. I would like to say that this is DSC, really, and the new version of sort of GPO. So what you can do here, there's two things that you can do here. These two little buttons here, right up here, they're very unassuming and they have different effects. So Jeremy is living in the initiative place and I'm living in the policy place. So since I'm talking, I'm just going to mention the policy thing here real quick. This is traditional policies, right? So over here, I can come in here. We're going to skip exclusions for a second. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to policy definition. And there's a whole bunch of built-in stuff here. And there's built-in policies, and then you can make your own. But there's, if you watch this button, you can see there's tons of stuff here built in. I'm going to show you real quick. Password. Here's the policies that they have built in for password compliance. So what I can do here is I could pick a policy, pick that policy, apply it against the machine or a group of machines, and then I can find out which machines are in compliance for these policies. So I've already done that. And so let me just go through it just to show you what it looks like. I'll stick to password because I know that one. I did that one. So order machines that don't have a password complexity setting enabled. Select. All right, and then I can put in a description. This is blah. Right. Do I want it enabled or disabled? Who's assigned by? Come in here, I can have parameters. So this is basically, is it on, is it off? I mean, excuse me, do I want it to apply to servers connected to Arc? I don't know why it would be false. I guess if you have VMs that are running that are not Arc connected. And then audit or don't audit, right? And then in here, you can decide what you want to do when that happens. I just started setting this up, so I don't have an idea of how this works, but you
One of
can.
the things there, Mike, is that to point out is that I've been doing some other research on the side about Arc and what it does, but some of the things you can do are effectively free. So you can do that, some of this management and stuff like that. But if you start establishing some policy and trying to like manage your devices from Azure to on-prem Arc machines, well, then it's a price. And so, per the documentation, it actually just started in November. It's $6 per server per month. So as you add nodes, there's a price, but it's effectively like almost what you're saying here is if you're building like policy and hey, I want to enforce policy down to, I want to use the Azure infrastructure to then manage my devices and institute policy. Well, then that's a price. So just to let you know out there. So look at the pricing, work with your, salesperson about that. But that is just there. Just want to put that out.
Thank you. And I would also say that I am sort of building up to something that Jeremy is going to show off in a little bit. That's probably way more useful to certain teams. I think we can all understand the idea of putting policies in place and being able to enforce those policies or at least check on them, right? So we can remediate here, and then we could apply this. I'm going to cancel this for a second. And I'm going to go back here. So I have two policies set up. Right, so one is audit Windows machines that don't have a maximum password age of 90 days. And you can see here, I have one non-compliant resource. We're working on DC1. I think you could figure out that DC1 is set up to not be compliant for this password. So you can set up a bunch of rule sets and apply it against the machine, and you can see very quickly compliance, right? Is or isn't. Then you can remediate. The other option here is a little bit more of a big picture item, and this is I'm going to hand over to Jeremy a little bit because this is something that he was interested in. These are to sign initiatives, and Jeremy, you can take over whenever you want, or I can give a little bit of a lead in here.
No, I'm fine to take over.
Okay.
Do you want me to switch over to my screen, or you just want me to tell you where to click?
Whatever you prefer.
Well, I would say start by going up and searching for Blueprint.
Okay, yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned that.
So Azure's got this cool thing now called Blueprints, and Blueprints are pre-made policies, essentially, that meet a ton of different things. The cool thing about this is that they're pre-built for what you would look for in different compliance standards. So for us, we're pushing really hard right now to make sure everything's 800.171. So yeah, just search for NIST, and you can see there's an 800.171 R2. So we can take this policy right here, well, really not policy, but blueprint, and then apply this to Azure as a whole, to a certain resource group, or just certain devices or resources in Azure. And it would tell me, this would give me a report as to whether or not those resources meet 800.171 R2 compliance or not. So this is extended into Azure Arc. And for me, my security and compliance office is very aggressive about ensuring that all of our devices stay compliant, because I work in the judicial branch, so go figure, right? So I like the fact, or for me, I guess what I like about Arc and what excites me is an ability for, there's no good way, right, to just be like, oh, these are all the places that I'm out of 800.171 R2 on my on-prem devices. You know, we can scan with Qualys or whatever, and it'll give us back a bunch of information. But when you're looking for these very specific compliance controls and what it links to from a technical thing on the box, and whether that technical thing's implemented or not, gets really muddy and difficult. But since we have this in Azure, and Microsoft's already done all the work for these technical controls and this compliant, or these controls in the compliance standard correlate to these technical controls on a device, if we go back into Arc, we can assign an initiative that is essentially what this blueprint is. And so now I can establish a policy that's, you know, a pre-built set of policies using the initiative, and get a line here that reports on whether or not my device or set of devices meet those compliance standards. So see, like right there at the top is my 171 R2.
So let me just jump in here, Jeremy, and mention something that you mentioned about 10 or 15 minutes ago. There was a question about 2 log agents on the box, right? So remember, we put that first agent on and it just got the machine into the console. I don't think that second agent is needed to do this part, right, Jeremy? Because that was
Correct.
just for the logs. So
Yeah, correct.
one agent gets in the console, and then he can use his initiatives to just scan and find the status of machines that meet.
Yeah, so if I were to put all of my devices on premises into Azure Arc, and then I assign this 800.171 R2 initiative, then it'll automatically do all of this stuff. Well, now, granted, there's a lot of things that we have to go do and fill out. And actually, this is a poor example, because to be 800.171 R2, it actually needs the log analytics agent so that it can do more robust data gathering to let me know whether or not I'm compliant. So in this instance, we still would need the log analytics agent, but there are other compliance standards that aren't going to be as heavy-handed, where I might not need that. It could just go and look at the configuration of the box directly. And it's just doing audit if exists, audit if not exist functions, and can return back that information. So that gives me a very easy ability to give the security and compliance office a view into not just our cloud resources, but also our on-premise resources, and whether or not they meet the different standards that we're required to meet. And so this is where I'm excited about Azure Arc and what I'm interested in looking at.
So if I create this,
Yeah, and I didn't want to make one of these because I really didn't want to just blow out your
I don't care.
credit card. You know what I mean?
It's just money.
So, because this is a pretty involved, the NIST one is a pretty involved one to get set up.
I don't know.
And you have to give a lot of different information as far as like, because it's going to monitor who's in your local admins groups for you. It's going to monitor what OS images have been installed on the devices. So if it's running a non-compliant, quote unquote, OS, you'll fail compliance from that one. Lots of different things. So I wasn't really intending to actually make this work, because that would be pretty brutal for your credit card, probably.
Let's try PCI. It's only one machine. It's just going to check, right?
Well, to that same point, though, it's kind of what you're also kind of talking is that, hey, once you kind of get some of that data into Azure itself, then you can do other things with it. Doing Sentinel and other monitor and all this other stuff. Well, those are other Azure services that cost things, but they're typically by how much processor, how much data, the actual data that you're processing, and how log analytics. It's a great, powerful tool. But if you're just pumping tons and tons of data, well, log analytics is a separate product that is billed at the quantity of data that you're using the logs. So it's a storage cost, really, effectively. And so that's what you're going to be paying for at that point. And so that's really what it is. And so just a lot of that is, you're dealing with effectively small stuff. You're doing little stuff, but there is a threshold where it's free. There's a lot of it's free up until a point. And so, hey, you just add 100 servers. Well, that's 100 servers of all that data. Hey, 10 or 5 servers, that's one thing too. But it is Azure and it is a service. And so there's a cost. So I don't want to feel like Debbie Downer, but just know that there's a cost, with everything.
Well, the flip side to that is that, think about it this way. Imagine if, you spent a couple days and you got your machines into the console, right? Or you did an automated task of a deployment of an agent. That agent runs a script. The script has a bunch of parameters in it that has all your subscription ID already in there. So these agents fire off, and all of a sudden, you got 100 or 200 servers that show up in the console, right? Now you can come along and you can take something like a simple template, and you can apply it across all those servers. And one of the things that Azure has done is it's built the dashboard for us, and you get a simple reporting tool to say what meets, what doesn't. That is a huge challenge for a lot of people to do today without sort of a central resource, right? You can go out and you can get a service. You got to get that service set up in your network. You got to set up a bunch of parameters. You got to get data pumped into it. It's got to scan the machines. Azure's made this really easy. I mean, literally, we're doing it with button clicks here, right? And we're just applying any policy that we want. And they've built the views so that after you apply the policy, you can start to consume the data in a short period of time. Obviously, I'm not running the task, so I can't check compliance. But imagine if this was running on a regular basis, and I can see a compliance state on everything that's important on these biases. This is a PCI compliance, right? Almost every company has PCI compliance for something, right?
So in my experience, these policies run about every 20 minutes. So since you've applied this in the next 20 minutes, this Linux box will pull the new policy down and then send its data up. So just the fact that it exists within the next 20 minutes, we should see non-compliant for sure, and then a whole bunch of whys.
But the cool thing, so that's awesome in itself. But the cool thing is like this service, as Phil was saying with the costing, you really can scale this to like mom and pop shop all the way up to thousands of servers. And it just comes down to, do you have the budget to do it? You don't have to build out the scale, right? You just have to get the data to there, and then Azure takes over for you. So think about this as in the view of a way to manage servers. There's an update management piece that's WSUS in the cloud. There's a logging piece. You can see you can do performance metrics. You can do logging, all kinds of great stuff there. They have a policy piece, which you can call GPOs. You can call DSC. They have compliance on steroids to do the security aspects that you talked about. They have security, which is going to be leveraging Defender ATP. So just think about this for a sec. So you're going to send one agent onto your box. It's going to phone home. And then from there, you get to decide through checkboxes which items you want to put on or subscriptions. And then you have the ability to put on a lot of really dynamic services that, by the way, you don't necessarily have to maintain. You're now an operator in a console. Microsoft's doing the work behind the scenes on Defender, on the policies. They built the policies for us. Monitoring, there's a tool to build your own custom monitoring tools, but they have a lot of built-in configs. Think about the ease of getting all this stuff working and having it in one console. So that's kind of what I took away from all this when I said, when I came into this view here and I go, oh, wow, this is a lot of what I work on in a day. Security, logging, updates, up, down, and making sure there's some compliance, right? So
I think that's where the single pane of glass really comes into play and really it's so nice. It's the ability for S&C or even you as an admin to be able to say, are all my machines up to date and not have to go look in many different places. you really can see everything from here once the agent's there and reporting data.
So one interesting thing that I didn't really mention yet is this extensions piece. And so the manager of my team has a significantly more amount of cloud experience than I do. And he's very well versed in this product. I've been learning it from him. And he was telling me that one of the things that's coming in the future is plugins. And by plugins, that's plugins for other services, right? Now, I don't know if plugins is separate from extensions, because what extensions does is gives you the ability, see here, Microsoft Monitoring Agent, but when I go add here, check this out. Now I can run my own scripts against my resources. I can import a script. If I would throw it up in a storage account, I could pull it from the storage account, and now I can pass some arguments in, and I can run my script against all my servers, a cloud-based script across multiple clouds. So maybe that's my on-prem resources, which was shown tonight. But don't forget, I could pull in AWS resources, GCP resources. Maybe you have SoftLayer or something, right? All those things can show up in one sort of dashboard. And then because I have an agent that phones home and consumes data, I can now push scripts to those servers to return data to the console. So that, I think, is a really interesting option that is super simple to do. I also wanted to mention Monitor, but I don't know if I'm ready to kind of show that because I'm probably going to embarrass myself. They have DSC here. They have some other stuff. I think what we're seeing, though, is a window into probably a lot of development in the next year or two. I know that I've had a phone call with Microsoft about some of these services. We're like a beta tester on some of this stuff, and we're trying to consume some of this. So I know that this is an active project in Microsoft, and it's rapidly changing. So today when I come in here and I go to update management and I see that this is not available today, I'm pretty sure that after Christmas time that this is going to be working for me. And now I'm patching my machines through the cloud, right? So there's a lot of things rolled into this console that gives me a lot of convenience in what Jeremy just said, one pane of glass.
So when you couple something like auto manage, which is now in preview, into this, that probably would override the update management. And that's going to make your both anything you're running in the cloud from an IaaS perspective and stuff you're running on-prem through Arc behave more like a PaaS platform. So that's really going to simplify management across the board for everybody.
So, I will say that all things cloud, when I come into the cloud from a long background of managing on-prem resources, I used to get very irate at like, oh my God, now they're offering this in the cloud. I can't do this on-prem anymore. But then when I think about it, most of the stuff that they offer, I don't really want to do. I just have to do because it's part of an infrastructure admin's job, right? Set up, build, configure. I really just would love to get to the manage part if I could, but it's the setup, build, and configure. Now look, from an architecture standpoint, that's fun. Build, design, and roll out. But then there's the reality of build, design, and roll out, like, well, this doesn't work, and let's figure out why. And oh, the vendor told me I got to do this, and the pre-sales and what the actual is two different things. I watch a lot of that go away when I get into the cloud and I get to these consoles, and I can just configure and manage and work, right? And now if I'm doing automation like this group normally talks about, scripting, automation, pushing things, I can suck my scripts in here, push them down onto servers. It's so easy. So much of the effort that would go into projects, stand up new resources on a network, goes away with this stuff. Get an agent, pump it up there, and it's a pre-built service you can consume. And now they're rolling it into a single pane of glass with a bunch of ways to leverage things. You don't have to take them all. There's 6, 7 services that are available. You can just use one, you can use 2, you can use 5. And like Phil was just saying, combine them with other services. And I mean, you can really do some powerful stuff here. Someone asked, is this free? There is free in everything in Azure, but at some point you're going to absorb some cost, and really it's going to come down to when you need to use their compute or you need to store your data on their systems. I think that's probably the easiest way to describe the cost.
Well, to Thomas's first question ahead, he said because Microsoft charges access from Azure to access your local on-prem data like file storage, well, that's a different thing. Arc doesn't magically help you with that. And Arc is this connector to on-prem, but you can't traverse like file storage. That's not what this is. And so there's management at that point, and then there's a connector at that point, but then that's really all it is. If you're trying to then route access the SQL servers and all that kind of stuff, well, that's not what that there's not that possible, because you're still going to have inbound and outbound traffic and all that. So that's a separate world than what we're talking about here.
But the flip side to that is that if I was the Microsoft salesman per se, right, or if I was the Microsoft solution architect, Microsoft is going to come along and say, why not host those file servers in the cloud, right? Microsoft at this point has an answer for everything that we do on-prem. That doesn't mean that it's the right solution. But the more that I do this, the more that I realize that the reason that we have stuff on-prem a lot of times is because, first of all, it wasn't that expensive or that much work to set up. It worked for the solution, but it doesn't always scale when the business changes, right? So I know what you're saying, Thomas, but I think Microsoft's version is consume our services, bring your data, and we'll make it easy for you to do all the things you have to do, rather than try to get our services to try to work with a bunch of stuff you have already sitting in your data centers. And if you think about that for a second, this is getting a little bit off topic, but I love to build and buy stuff and set it up, but nobody loves the quoting process and the 5-year, year-over-year return on investment calculators and cost of goods and all that stuff. Someone wants to buy a SAN, you have to figure out if it's worth it for the next 5 years. All that goes away, right? So that's why sometimes trying to figure out how to make Azure work for your on-prem services is not really the way to do it. Maybe the next time you're going to refresh your equipment, it's just cheaper to park that equipment in the cloud and be able to pay for it in a monthly service rather than have to try to justify a 3-year outlay of money, right? So that's how Azure looks at it, right? They want to get as much services as they can into the cloud, and they're trying to make it as easy as possible. And I will say that the longer I do this, the harder it is to justify doing the stuff on-prem if I mix anything with the cloud.
Well, and I would almost add to that, your centralized logging on-prem is not free, right? If you're using Splunk, it's certainly not free. If you're using, any other centralized logging source, you're paying for that infrastructure. You're paying for the network bandwidth that you're using on your infrastructure there. So, as you look at your license renewals for that type of thing, that's when I would start looking at Microsoft and saying, hey, give me a cost comparison. Here's the amount of data I have in my Splunk system or my whatever logging system. How is that going to compare over a 6-month period with 10 terabytes of data if I move to Arc? And then do the same thing for your monitoring, right? Because typically that's another set of servers that is its own infrastructure footprint cost, and all the other different cool features that you were kind of walking through here.
I mean, it's all spending money. It's just in what ratio or what metric works for the business. A big cash outlay versus a month-to-month spend, being able to scale it up dynamically or not. There's no right answer here, but the more I see this stuff, the more I just feel like a lot of the stuff that I used to suffer with management and setup of, it's just going away, right? And it just gets easier. I did want to show so let me just say, so I'll give Jeremy a chance to chime in because I keep cutting him off here. I don't know if there's any other topics that you wanted to cover, Jeremy, or go back to anything in general.
No, we're good. Keep going.
All right. So I'm just going to paste this right on the end here for a second. This is the Linux version of the same script. So it's just a couple of lines. You can see what's going on here. This is the script that Jeremy had run to get this in. I'm going to blow up my tenant and start over, so I'm not worried about if tenant ID is out there so much. But it's not a challenge to come up with a script that you can deploy to a bunch of machines with a couple of tags, a couple of tenant IDs in there. It's not a lot of work. It's a pretty well thought out system. So I want to wrap up here and just say, we wanted to just give a really high level cursory look at what this Azure Arc service is and some of the things you can do. I would love to be an expert and be able to dive in here and show you guys a lot more. I would say that I think I'd like to consume this service more and get better at it and come back and maybe do a deeper dive on logs as maybe just one talk or monitoring or policies, right? And be able to really go in and answer those questions. I can't do that tonight for you guys, and I apologize. I hope it didn't feel like, oh man, I wish I could see how it actually works. I literally just kicked the tires on this in a couple of weeks ago and thought it would be interesting to show to the group to see kind of what's on the forefront of happening in the Azure cloud with asset management for servers and things you could do. So I don't have too much else to present than that. I would be open to questions or anything you guys want to talk about, but that's kind of what we were going to talk about tonight. I hope there was some value in that for you guys. Can open up the discussion here.
All right, thank you. Yeah, that was great. Appreciate it.
Cool, man. Cool.
Yeah.
I am personally trying to work myself into doing more Azure content. I'm very AD focused. It's kind of hard to be new and exciting with AD. It's been around for 20 years,
Exactly. All right. I'm going to drop myself, but that was great. I'm glad I joined tonight.
Yeah, that was excellent. Good stuff. I have to start looking into this for work, my new job with a managed service provider. So quite a few customers that still have some stuff on-prem. And most of my work is in the cloud. So this is going to be interesting to see how this ties in. And that's where I came up with the auto managed stuff too, is that's something I'm actually presenting on internally at work next week. So that and Azure Arc are two things that are going to definitely have a big impact in my job. So thanks. Good job, guys.
Thanks.
So Phil, let me just say congratulations. I did see online that you got a new position. So congrats to you. And who knows, maybe we'll ask you to come back and do a demo on this when you're like super pro rock star at Azure Arc.
Yeah. You'll have a lot more gray hair by then, Mike.
Hey, I'm chasing you in that department. So what do you guys think? Any other questions we can answer before we wrap up here?
Actually, I don't have a question, but once I've been shown about the blueprints, and they show us like you can use the blueprints just to make sure that your environment is compliant, and as it has a blueprint applied, you cannot change nothing from those machines to make it unapplying. So, for example, if you on the blueprint says that you need to have, I don't know, maybe an application install, and you try to remove that application, you can't, because it will not allow you to do that, the blueprint. That's one of the security stuff that we've been told in where I work. And also, the Microsoft guy told us that, for example, there's a client that used the blueprints like I don't know how, but to like deploy an environment. Yeah. And for example, if you have, I don't know, 3 web apps, maybe a Kafka and functions and that, and you remove one somehow, the blueprint should create automatically that service or that server or whatever it was automatically, so it gets compliance again.
I know I was on a call, and I know that there's a lot of effort going into the policy piece, right? Policies, because I think every company is basically running an Active Directory, and every company is running GPOs. And DSC, for whatever reason, hasn't become the be-all and end-all solution in the Microsoft world. So I know that there's some love going back into the DSC product, and I think that is probably going to be featured in this kind of tool here, which is basically what you've been talking about, Diego, right? Is DSC. I think that's going to get a lot more attention because I don't think there is I think group policy is probably one of the biggest weak points right now in the cloud.
Yeah, you're going to see. So the DSC stuff, I was talking with someone, an advocate at Microsoft about it. They're shifting DSC over to JSON format and out of that sort of archaic DSC specific format. So that's going to be a lot more friendly for folks that are doing stuff code based, right? So a ton of Azure stuff is JSON based. So DSC will adopt that sort of JSON format. It'll be a little easier to consume. And then you also have things like Bicep, which is sort of making JSON even easier to use and consume. So we'll see some convergence in that space. So something about the policies and the blueprints, you can set exceptions to certain things. And also you can set certain policies to only be in the audit only mode and not necessarily be in the remediate mode as well, right?
Yeah.
So just to touch on that thing about not being able to uninstall something, you could set a specific exception for something, and that should allow you for that individual server to uninstall that app.
I wanted to see if I could show you guys here pricing. I'm trying to see if I can find out what I've spent. Hopefully it's not a lot of money. Cost management.
Check over your shoulder, make sure the wife's not there.
I
was going to say you might want to drag it over to another screen to make sure your credit card's not there.
I'll change it. I'm not so worried about it. I haven't seen any money come in yet on this. And so one of the things that I like about this is, I don't even remember where to go in here. See, so I've made the mistake of hosting VMs in the cloud and forgetting to shut them off. And I've had, unfortunately, $50 and $80 a month bills because I'm like, oh crap, I thought I had shut off.
Cost alerts.
I thought I had set it to shut off at like 11 o'clock at night or something, and cost alerts, and I didn't have it set correctly. So this doesn't seem to consume that kind of money. Obviously, stop pumping up a bunch of log data, yes, but I wish I could show you guys some real data. I don't see too much going on right now.
I think somebody earlier today had asked about pets and cattle, and I made the mistake of treating my first EC2 instances as pets. And I had them shut down when I wasn't actively using them, not realizing that it still cost me storage costs. So
I made the same
I was
mistake.
fuming when I had an $8.30 charge at the end of the month because I didn't think I was expecting that.
Well, Jeremy,
it could have been a lot worse.
Jeremy's the king of managing the costs because he's done a lot of serverless stuff, and his bills are always like $3 a month. Meanwhile, I'm playing around with VMs.
Oh, it's 30 cents.
Yeah, and I was playing around with VMs, and I was getting banged like $40 a month, and I'm like, what am I doing wrong? This sucks. So I've given up on VMs in the cloud for labs for myself. All right, so why don't I do this? Let me just stop the recording here. I hope you guys enjoyed this tonight. This will be out on YouTube if you want to catch it again. Thanks so much for coming tonight. Really hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for listening.